You know the vibes. We're back. The Hoop Genius podcast presented by NBA 2K22. If you don't already have your copy, hit the link in the description and get yours now, because myself, Mo Mooncey, alongside the legend that is BJ Armstrong. And today I've got to tell you one thing. This is called the Hoop Genius podcast, but my knowledge of basketball is nothing in comparison to today's special guest. If I was to read you his CV and his experience, he's been doing this since longer than I've been alive. A real OG in the game, a man who's been there, seen it all, done it all, coached some of your favorite players, coached some of the greatest players of all time, two-time NBA champion, Coach Brendan Suhr. Thank you for joining the show.
It is an honor, Mo. BJ has been bragging about you and your show that you guys have, and I am honored to be on it.
Man, BJ's been telling me about you the whole way through. Since day one, he said, listen, we got to get Coach on the show. We got all this stuff we talk about. We got to get Coach's perspective. So I appreciate you taking the time to join.
Thanks. And I go all over the world to teach and coach the game and educate. And I love our fans. I love Europe, love London, and all of England. So it is really fantastic to be on with you guys.
You know, when you have an opportunity to compete against someone, you really find out who they really are. And I hold Coach Suhr and the late Chuck Daly in the highest regards. This is my Yoda. This is my teacher. This is my mentor. And when I tell you he's a basketball savant, I truly mean it. You hear these terms, genius thrown out. Coach knows this game. He is a basketball lifer. I don't even feel comfortable calling him coach because he's a lifer. This is what he does.
We're going to call him.
I'm so happy and so pleased for him to be here and share his knowledge. Hopefully he'll come back and join us where the fans and our listeners can come back and ask him questions, because I'm telling you, he is the best. And he's seen it all. He's been there. He's done that. And Mo, I can't wait for today's episode. And I'm really looking forward to it as well.
We're going to call him a real life legend, because I think
it's
important we give the flowers to those, because everyone likes to give flowers when it's too late. So we got to show appreciation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's not overdo the damn flowers. All right.
Here's the thing. As much as we can talk up how great of a coach and how great your knowledge is, the people, if they want to find, if they love this episode, they can catch your podcast as well, the Coaching You podcast. Do you want to tell the people, before we get into today's topics, where they can find more of your content and learn more of the game from you as well?
Yeah, you know, Mo, we've been trying to, kind of happen by accident, but we really tried to help coaches, in the United States get better. And then the next thing you know, the Canadian coaches came involved, and then the Australian coaches. And then, frankly, a couple of years ago, I found out through the internet that we had 178 countries listening to our podcast. And that was shocking, flattering, humbling. And that is the best part. So my mission now in life is to try to educate the world in basketball, because I think coaching is one of the neatest professions in the world, because as BJ and I have endless hours of conversations about coaching, but coaching is about taking players where they can't take themselves. I don't care who you are as a great player. And that's what we try to do. And that's what we try to teach coaches to do worldwide. And that's what we're excited about. So any week they come on, they can hear coaches from not just in the States, from Australia, from Europe, on our podcast. And I think they'd like it. CoachingYouLive.com is our website. And please, we would be honored to have you listen.
Coaching You, and that's with a U, not Y-O-U, it's the letter U. If you guys are listening to this on audio, you got it confused. But before we're going to talk about some of the teams and players in the NBA right now. But, I've heard so much about this relationship and how you've taught BJ so much. I need to take it all the way back. How did you guys first meet? Can you share that story with the listeners? How did you first cross paths, and how has this friendship developed over the years?
Well, the friendship developed when I was coaching the Pistons, and he was a phenomenal high school player in Michigan. And the year that I went there to coach, he was a senior in high school at Brother Rice High School, which is a phenomenal private school, and he nearby where we lived, and he was one of the best guards in the country. And the following, he was then he went to Iowa, University of Iowa, and was an All-American. Could have gone anywhere in the country, but he goes to Iowa. And then after we won our world championship, he came in the NBA as a rookie to play against the great Isaiah Thomas and others. And so I just loved the way he played. I loved him because Detroit has a bad rap of tough kids and all that. This was a gentleman playing basketball and a genius as far as a smart player. And I loved his class and his style that he played with. And then, we competed against each other because the Pistons and the bad boys, the Pistons were, and the Bulls were, we didn't like each other, and we had some really neat battles, and the competition was fierce. And the funny thing was, the players on both teams, they competed so hard against each other, but there was such great respect. And then later in my career, the great Chuck Daly and I got to coach him, which turned into, a dream come true. And that's how our relationship really accelerated.
BJ, did you always find it tougher going up against the Pistons when coach over there has been watching you way before everyone else? So, he knows all your tricks. He knows what you're trying to do on the court.
No, I didn't. I know the key, Mo, and to our listening audience here is there was a level of respect, and he was the very best at what he did. All right. Chuck Daly was as well respected as any coach has ever stood on the sidelines. And he had phenomenal coaches. And one of those phenomenal coaches was Coach Suhr. And we had a pretty good team. At the time, this was a young coach in Phil Jackson, who hadn't won 10, 11 championships, what he eventually went on to do, but we were all trying to find a way. Michael Jordan was a young player, and there was an obstacle in his way, and that was the Detroit Pistons and the Bad Boys. The Detroit Pistons were perhaps the greatest defensive team in the history of the NBA, not just that era, in the history, okay? The way they played as a group and the way they defended, they were able to contain one of the greatest offensive players in the history of the game. Okay. And the only way you were going to beat them was as a team. You weren't going to beat them with an individual player, individual talent. And that all came from the Detroit Pistons team. And they had phenomenal leadership. They talk about the physicality of the game. That was, yes, of course, in that era. But the thing that stood out with the Detroit Pistons teams were their mental toughness. This was as mentally tough of the group, that, I've ever seen. And, the funny thing, I think Coach and I, we laugh about it now, you talk about, disliking someone. Well, the Bulls and the Pistons really disliked them. We really disliked each other. But, the funny thing about it is we became the Detroit Pistons when it was all said and done. We became the Detroit Pistons. So I owe that to Coach Suhr. It was a joy to be able to spend just that 1 year together with Coach Daly and Coach Suhr, and Coach Suhr and I, we talked countless hours of the day, and it's like the podcast. I mean, we were going to talk anyway for an hour. Now we're just happen to be taping it today. So we learned so much from this gentleman. Coaches coached the greatest players. We got to go into the dream team. We got to go into championships. We got to go into all of that. But because of him, I learned the mental toughness that's necessary to win. Everybody talk about game plans and all that. There's a certain level that you have to have. As Coach and I, Coach has taught me, there has to be a blended brand of basketball that must be played if you're going to be crowned champion. So I owe that to learning it from the Pistons, learning it, when I was there in Chicago, and now we're sharing that with everyone else.
So, you talk about the mental toughness of the Detroit Pistons, and, you often hear kind of retired players get onto younger players, especially when they do TV and stuff, and they criticize them heavily. But from your perspective then, Coach, because you've coached all the way from the Bad-Boy Pistons, and you even just a few years ago were coaching college players who you see in the NBA right now. What is the biggest difference you see in players? Because a lot of people say Now players, they only play 1 year of college and they've made it before they've actually made it. What's the biggest difference in your opinion, though, looking at those guys in the 80s and 90s compared to the guys that come into the league now?
Well, when we won our championship the first year, our salary cap for the entire team was $6.2 million, the whole team. And now the luxury tax is $147 million, if you can imagine that. I mean, so money. BJ and I talk about all the time. The biggest thing that we look for now is I look for players that love the game. The players back then, they loved to play. We didn't make enough money. They didn't make enough money to be anything but that. And, I was watching NBA TV last night, and all of a sudden I'm looking at it. I'm flipping the channels. The Bulls were on. I wanted to see one of my friends coaching. And all of a sudden I'm looking, and the two announcers in the studio are Isaiah Thomas, one of my absolute favorites, and Dominique Wilkins, who I had his first 8 years in Atlanta playing for me, the Human Highlight Film, who's one of the greatest. Jordan was 1A, he was 1B. Yep. I mean, as far as excitement, when they were both young kids coming into the league. And it was so much fun. And I'm watching those two at like 60 years old are talking about the NBA and their love of talking about it and loving the players nowadays. It's refreshing for me to see. But so I think that's number one. And the way they competed. I mean, they competed. Trust me, if you watch a game, I'm watching the game the other night, and Trae Young from the Hawks is playing against someone on TV, and the game ends, and they're hugging and kissing. That would not have happened when the Bulls and Pistons played.
Coach, I wanted to hug you. I wanted to hug and kiss you, but
I did not, because you
blew me
kicked my
off.
ass, so I didn't want to hug. No, I did not. And the funny thing was, Michael Jordan's dad, I love James Jordan as BJ did, and we became phenomenal friends. And that was our friendship. James Jordan, and tells you a little bit about Chuck Daly. Every time we'd play the Bulls, especially in Detroit, in the Palace of Auburn Hills at the time, James Jordan would come to the game, and he would come and sit before the game for an hour with Chuck and I in our coach's office.
Wow.
Welcomed him. Loved it. Some coaches would say, "Get him out of here." We loved it. We just talked and never talked about Michael.
You never shared that with me, Coach. So you would talk to Mr.
Just
Jordan
talk about life, or
just talked. And the funny thing was, at the end of this is before BJ gets in the league. The year before, we were going to win the championship. We're beating Michael, in 6 games, and during the playoffs, it was rumored that I was going to be offered a head coaching job of a team that will remain nameless. It was Minnesota Timberwolves, and they were an expansion team, and Chuck is trying to talk me out of it. You don't want to go there. You just won 63 games. You're going to win 5 games there. And I turned to James Jordan and I said, "James, what would you do?" He shook his head like, I don't think so. And I said, "How about if we could get Mike to come?" He said, "Not to Minnesota. No. We're not going to Minnesota.
Chicago's cold enough.
I'm not going to Minnesota." He said, "I'm not going." But that was the relationships that we really valued. And it was, and that's what, to us, coaching was about, the relationships with the players we had, the relationships with family. And that, like when we talk about the dream team later on, we got to convince Mike to play in the dream team. And people think that he hates the Pistons. He hated the Pistons, but he didn't hate Chuck Daly. And that's how he became, came on the team. So, but I love that part of it, and they played to win every night. That was the best part. It was just very simple. We came, we wanted to play that game, and we played hard. And when the game was over, we moved on to the next game.
Hey, Coach, I've always wanted to ask you a question. I got so much I want to ask you, but at what point did you guys realize, when I say you guys, the coaching staff and the front office realize we can win with this group? right? You see so much tinkering. You see so much tinkering like today. Like, you know, like I don't, I'm not buying into this. Like, okay, they just made this big trade in Brooklyn, and all of a sudden they're saying this team can win. You know, Philadelphia, you're going to bring James Harden, this team can win. At what point did you believe that this group, this core group of players
with the Pistons?
Yeah. At what point, and you say, we're going to go to battle with this group and allow this team to reach whatever they're supposed to reach. At what point did that happen for you guys?
Yeah, I was in Atlanta at the time, coaching the Hawks with Dominique and those guys, and we were battling the Pistons every year, and then they got finally past us, and then they went after Boston, and they kept going they went to Game 7 and lost. Then they went the following year, and Isaiah threw the ball away when they could have clinched it in the last few seconds. That was before I got there, and then the year before I got there, they could have clinched it in Game 6, and a mysterious foul was called, and then they lost by 2 points in Game 7. So they probably 3 years prior to me coming there, they knew they were good enough, and they were. And as you know, having won 3 championships, there has to be a little luck in there at some point.
Yep.
Staying injury free, referee calls, making big shots, making free throws when they count. And so that probably 3 years ahead of time, they knew they were good enough, but they hadn't quite gotten over it.
How much do you think that those tough experiences of just not going far enough, losing at the very last second or losing in the round before the finals, how much does that pay in? Because now we talk about championship experience, playoff experience, and groups having gone through that. We saw it with the Bucks. Last year, they finally went through and won a championship after year upon year of disappointment. How much does that disappointment fuel teams, and how much do you use that to motivate your players when it does come to time to winning?
Mo, I think a lot has to do with, does your coach, does your front office keep the team together and maybe make one little tweak in it? Because when you're that close, sometimes impatience of the front office breaks a team up. So I think the teams that, one of our sayings was, you can't skip steps. And so I think, the Pistons didn't skip steps of trying to get through Boston. The Bulls didn't skip a step. Oh, and the Pistons didn't skip a step of beating the Lakers. They had to overcome that. And then the Bulls didn't skip a step. They had to beat the Pistons. Rarely do you ever go from one point all the way up. You usually have some heartache in between.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Mo.
So I have to ask this before we get on to talking about the dream team in your illustrious career. This trade that's just happened in the NBA, James Harden and Ben Simmons switching teams. You obviously coached Ben Simmons at LSU, and I wanted to get your take on how you expect him to fit in with the Brooklyn Nets and what you've seen going from his college days to from where he was a pretty confident player to kind of what we saw at the end of the playoffs last season. How do you think he's changed as a player? Why do you think that is? If we can dive into that for a little bit, because I'm sure the people at home are very keen to know.
Yeah, since he's engaged to a girl from London, I think. So
yes. Much to the heartbreak of many of my friends.
He's a very good scout of talent from London. Better than BJ and I were as far as when we were drafting players, not with our wives, But she doesn't listen to my podcast anyway, so I can say anything I want regarding it. But anyway, the thing about Ben. And BJ went and saw him when he was, in his high school years in Australia. And then when I got to LSU, I called BJ and said, let me tell you something. This is the most phenomenal kid I've ever seen. We discussed it and everything. He's the best, most talented player I've ever seen enter the NBA.
Explain that, coach. Explain that, coach. Explain that.
Bird, Jordan stayed 3 years in college. Bird stayed over 4 years in college.
Magic.
LeBron came in out of high school, but he was ahead of LeBron. He was way more advanced. Imagine that. He's 3 inches taller than LeBron. He was bigger than LeBron coming in. This kid was at 18 years of age, he was 6'10" and a half, 243 pounds. He was the fastest player on the floor. But I've never seen anyone that could pass like that. I mean, anyone. And his vision.
Magic included. Magic included.
Magic included at the same age. I mean, Magic made the no look fancy stuff, but Ben saw everyone and delivered it to everyone. Magic used to wait to make the home run play. Ben will give it up at 3/4 court to a guy racing for a layup. You know, I mean, it's a different style, but he's so much faster than Irvin was in the open court. I heard him this morning at his press conference in Brooklyn say, "This is going to be fun because we're going to play at the pace I like with Steve Nash," which I agree. Brooklyn played very slow with Harden, very slow. Their pace was one of the slowest in the NBA. And because James also dribbled a lot. So they didn't take shots very early in the shot clock. This is a guy that's going to get the ball, and he gets excited when he throws the ball to someone to make a shot. Seth Curry, Kyrie Irving, all these guys Patty Mills and now Durant, all those guys driving to the basket, dumping it off for Drummond. I think it's going to be really, really special for him. But I think the part, BJ, about him was he did not need to come to college. The rules made him come to college, but he was ready. He physically and mentally, basketball-wise, was ready for the NBA. I've never seen a player on the court against NBA players that no one in the NBA can stay in front of him. That's it. Irvin was a guy that it was easy to stay in front of because he was so strong. He just backed you in. This guy is so fast, no one can stay in front of him. That was the nemesis to really stop him from my encouragement of you need to develop your shot. Why, coach? I don't have to take it. I can get by everyone. He understands now, but that was my thing. I just pray for him that he just really gets back to loving the game, loving the best part of NBA basketball is being on a great team with great teammates.
Right.
And he expressed that this morning that he's really looking forward. He went, 8-9 months without that. So I'm hoping that really comes full circle for him. And I think Kevin Durant and I think Steve Nash is the perfect coach for him because Steve played the position so well.
So, I just wanted to expand on just something you just said there real quick. Sorry, BJ. When you said to him about practicing his outside shooting and he said, "I don't need to, I can get by everyone." So is it been the 3-point shooting has been a thing he's never been interested in developing because he's got that? Because we hear things in the media and fans say a lot of stuff of he's scared to shoot this shot. So are you saying it's simply he thinks he's good enough that he doesn't need to even shoot those shots?
No, I think Mo, when he was a freshman in college, when he was 18 years old, my whole thing when I was brought into LSU to coach him because they promised him that he would have an NBA coach tutor him, basically. And the coach that was there prior to me was Eric Musselman, who had been in the NBA, actually worked with Chuck and I in Orlando when BJ was there. But Eric's the coach of Arkansas now. And he went to the University of Nevada at that time from LSU. So they had to scramble in July to try to get me to come there. And the only reason I didn't stay in the NBA was my daughter went to LSU and my wife said, "Oh, I want to go to Baton Rouge." So that's why we went to Baton Rouge. And I would have preferred Oklahoma City, I think, but anyway, we went there and so my thing to him was really simple. I said, "I'm not worried about you being the first pick in the draft. That's not what this is about. I'm not worried about you becoming the rookie of the year. I'm worried about you. I want you to become the MVP in this league. That's how good you are." So I set the bar super high. And then when we would work together, I would say, "You're good enough right now to be the first pick. You're good enough to be rookie of the year. But to do the other stuff, you need a complete game." And that's still the conversation. That's still the conversation. A lot of things have, gotten mixed up in the thing prior to that, but he still has to. I don't, 3-point shot to me is not important for him. He just has to be able to make 17 to 20-foot shots, not 23-foot
I think the
shots.
free throws is the most important.
Oh, well, see, he shot very good free throws for us. He was over 70%. He made 17 or 19 free throws in one game for us. Uh, right now, mechanically, his elbow is out almost perpendicular. I'm not sure that I know what the hell that is, but it's out to the side, but it's crooked. And so he needs to straighten it out. I can't believe that, they couldn't correct that. It's really simple. And then it's confidence. And I don't think a lot of people would say when you lose confidence as an athlete, golf, basketball, any sport, premier soccer, it's about confidence. That confidence is mental, right? That's mental health, mental
Right.
skills. And so that's one of the things that great athletes lose the quickest is confidence. And that's from poor performance. So that's what happened there. And I think it just snowballed tremendously in that series against Atlanta last year.
Coach, I remember when he was there, and you and I would we talk, and we still talk to this day. There's this one thing, because you've coached great players, I've played with great players. All these great players, they have a presence about them. They walk into a room, they walk into a locker room, they get on the court, they're there. Ben Simmons, without question, is as gifted as a player. He has every tool in the toolbox. He's got the size, strength, and all those things. My question to you is very simple. Where does he fit mentally into this pecking order? As far as, is he the best player? Is he the second best player? Third player? Where does he fit? Because we see the gifts. Mm-hmm. And you've coached him, you know him. Where does he fit in all this with his natural personality? Where does he fit into this?
Yeah, that's a great one. So from a physical standpoint, he's at the very top of the league, top 10 physical athletes. But what makes the guys that really excel in the top 10 is that they have that incredible mental skills, those mental Isaiah, Chris Paul, those guys, man, they're so mentally tough, and they're not. And I think that's what makes them great.
Is that a born skill, or is that something that a player can learn?
I think personally, Mo, I think it's more born, and then you can get someone to help it. Just like a coach, he can. It's got to be a real expert in that field, not in the field of psychology as much as a combination. I think nowadays, I think the best mental skills coaches are ones that really have expertise in the sport and in that area. Boy, that's hard to find someone who does, but I think that is the thing. And it's not easy because it can come and go so quickly. But the ones that every athlete in every sport, when they perform poorly, you see, boy, that there's a drop unless you're so strong that can keep it. That's my hope for him, is that all of a sudden he has such a great experience. He and the teammates he's around can lift him up, because I think when you're with a great team, you can get lifted up by your support people. I think Pippen played better because Jordan and the others were there. I think it's happened all the time. And I just think when you're around greatness, it kind of like gets on you a little bit, hopefully. So he was in a very good state this morning. I was really happy for him. And I think it's obviously a great change for him. So I hope so. My dogs agree. Yes. They love Ben.
No, it's fascinating, what fans have their takes on and what the media like to say, and then getting the perspective from someone who's been there and coached him and seen him grow as, as a player. My question is now, do you think that his fit with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving is a good fit? Because as talented as Ben is, he's great at finding guys and getting them easy looks, whereas Kyrie and KD are notorious for creating their own looks off the dribble. How much do you expect their games to be elevated by the presence of Ben Simmons on that team?
I think it could go through the roof. I really do. Because the one thing about when you're a great player like KD, if you can get into the open court to get easy shots so the whole defense can't stack up on you, I'll put Kevin against anyone one-on-one. Kyrie is one of the most gifted players we've ever seen in the league, a total magician. I think he's one of those guys that, BJ was a point guard, Kyrie is a point guard. This guy is a scorer. He's a point guard masquerading as a scorer. And so I think just saying to him, you go, don't worry about bringing the ball up the court, go up there and score. I think he could be unstoppable. I really do. The thing about Ben is he's 6'11" now. He's grown almost an inch since he's been in the league, 6'11 and a half almost. And so he has a terrific post-up game. And that's where you can really do some damage on who's going to guard him. Like Draymond Green, guards CP3 when they play Phoenix because he's not super fast.
Mm-hmm.
Ben's too fast for that matchup to happen. Let's say you got to put someone small and quick, but now he can go in. He's one of the best rebounders in the league. I just think, but they also have some really good players in Patty Mills and Seth Curry that can flat out make shots. So
and Joe Harris when he returns.
Right.
Yeah, if we can ever get his ankle better, I'll give him my ankle. Healthy, my ankle.
Hey, Coach, I want to shift a little bit to Philly. We're talking a lot about Brooklyn. I want to shift to Philly.
Sure.
And I was saying earlier, I think this is perhaps one of Doc Rivers' greatest coaching years in his career thus far. And the reason I'm going to say this, and here's why, is because Doc Rivers has coached through the adversity and all of the dysfunction that has happened. And when all of the smoke cleared, this team, minus Ben Simmons and all of the things that has happened, they're like a game or so out of first place.
Yeah.
That to me is an incredible achievement. What do you think of Doc Rivers coaching this year? And what do you think with the addition? Because now with the addition of another piece, Doc Rivers is going to lose 2 starters. He's going to lose a rotational player in Drummond. You're adding James Harden, and we're still thinking that they should win the championship.
Right.
So can you share with, I think Doc Rivers has to be up for Coach of the Year. But what do you think of the trade from the Philadelphia standpoint?
Well, from a front office standpoint, Daryl Morey and Tad Brown, who are the executives running the Houston Rockets, who are running Philadelphia now, he had great trust in them and they had great trust in James. So they knew what they wanted. They knew from experience that this guy is another level. Doc had always been a fan because he had always played and got your butt kicked by James. So the interesting thing that James said this morning in his press conference, I thought, was he always respected, and one of his bucket list things was to play for Doc Rivers. Well, let me tell you, when that is said by a player, that's, you talk about validating a coach, that you can't get any better than that. And Doc has been coaching now 24 years. Wow. And I remember when I first went and told him, I really think you should consider coaching, told me to go F myself.
Because he was in media, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in TV after he played for 13 years. And I drafted him and coached him for 8 years in Atlanta. So I was very close to him and I said, I think you could be a great coach. And he said, I don't want to be any damn coach. No, I don't want to do that. And he has just been phenomenal.
What made him change his mind?
Probably because he got offered a job. He got offered the job I was at. I convinced him to be a coach, and then the next thing you know, he took our job. But he just did it, and he gave him a bad team, and he became coach of the year his first year out. And I think what he learned is that the difference. he also got fired from the same team that he was coach of the year with. And I think that also is a humbling experience, but also makes you better when you get fired. Because now you're either going to fall off the earth or you're going to really figure out what you did wrong. And then within 4 months after being fired, Danny Ainge offered him the job with the Celtics. So I think, he's gone through a lot of tough times. He's been fired twice. He got, at the Clippers and also in Orlando. So when you get fired, you don't have fear. And also, his strength is in relationships, but he's really become a good tactician.
Yep.
He's always went out and hired great coaches as assistants, which I give him credit for. He's had Tom Thibodeau, Lawrence Frank. He's always had good assistants.
Tyronn Lue, who's one of the best coaches in the league right now for the Clippers.
Yeah, Mo, he brought Ty Lue in there because he was Kevin Garnett's friend in Boston.
Yeah.
He brought him in like as a coaching assistant to teach him. And then 3 years later, he made him the defensive coordinator when Lawrence Frank left. And that's when he just blew up as a coach. And I think that, he sees talent in coaches and he sees talent in players. And I think that's what, but he's really a good X and O guy, which a lot of former players aren't.
One thing that fascinates me about Doc Rivers is he was traded for a pair of first-round picks when the Clippers wanted to hire him as their head coach. They sent the Celtics a couple of picks just to get him to go and sign over there. So my question is, I hear from people that some coaches are better for player development. Some coaches are better for coaching veterans and getting them to gel. You saw what Doc Rivers did with the Celtics in bringing in Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and leading them to a championship. And that's why the Clippers wanted him to put him with CB3 and Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan to make those guys mesh. That's why the Sixers want him to try and make those guys mesh. Do you think he's going to be able to make the James Harden and Joel Embiid fit actually work? Because James Harden hasn't had the smoothest of rides playing alongside other superstars so far in his career.
Great point. Yes, he will. He'll maximize those guys. I think people are just, and BJ will attest to this, your great players better deliver if you're going to win a championship. But it's your guys that have to become stars as role players that actually help win championships. Everyone talks about Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars, but we won because of Rodman, Lambeer, and all these guys, Vinnie Johnson, who are all-star role players. And so I think that's what it, and they have to make sure those guys, they gave up a lot in this trade, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see. But it is so hard to win a championship, so damn hard, and so many things can go wrong. And I think they did the right thing both teams did the right thing to give their teams a chance. That's the number one thing.
Coach, this list just came out with the top 15 coaches.
Oh, you want to go there already, BJ?
Yeah, I got
there already. Okay.
I got to go there.
Should I read the list for the people? Should I read the list for the people?
Let's read the list. And I want to, because Coach has coached against them. So I want to read the list and I want to hear his thoughts.
So the list was selected by a panel of 43 current and former NBA head coaches in collaboration with the National Basketball Coaches Association, which is led by President Rick Carlisle, head coach of the Indiana Pacers. Okay. So the 15 greatest coaches in NBA history, according to this list: Red Auerbach, Casey Jones, Pat Riley, Larry Brown, Chuck Daly, Don Nelson, Jerry Sloan, Red Holzman, Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, Phil Jackson, Jack Ramsey, Lenny Wilkins, Doc Rivers, and Steve Kerr.
And how many of those guys have you coached against, Coach?
Coached against everyone except Auerbach, and you asked me if I was sick that day, and I said, no, damn it, he's a little older than I am. But he was coaching guys that way before BJ was born. But Auerbach's the only one. Imagine that.
So you've coached against 14 of those guys on that list.
Yeah. And the scary part is I added people to that list because I think 15 was a weird number.
And Rick Carlisle, you brought Rick Carlisle into the league, right?
Yeah, as a coach,
As a coach.
He just finished playing with the Celtics, and he worked for his former coach, the great Bill Fitch, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, who was ironically in the top 10 coaches at the 50-year anniversary. Now the poor guy passes away and he can't make the top 15 now.
Crazy.
But
So,
yeah, I mean, so Bill Fitch, he coached over in 2,000 games. Can you imagine that? 2,000 games.
Wow.
And excuse me once. And so there's so many great coaches. My high school coach and the person that brought me into the NBA was the great UB Brown, who I guess over in Europe they can see when he does some games on TV. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
But UB is 88 years old now, and he coached me my freshman and sophomore year of high school, and the greatest teacher we've ever had in the NBA. Actually,
Really?
There's not even a second. That's how great he was as a coach.
How come you say that? How come you say that?
Well, he just was his. You talk about presence, BJ. He just had that ability. He was a high school teacher, a high school coach that coached U.S. football, U.S. basketball, and baseball. He just was a coach and teacher personified. But when he taught, no one in the room ever moved, whether it was a coach's clinic or a practice. You sat there on every word. He was so detailed the way he taught. And I just, he was just mesmerizing is the word I use. And I remember when I went to work for him, I was 27 years old coaching the Atlanta Hawks, and he was coach of the year. And Mike Fratello, who's another great coach, who's, coached over 1,200 games. Mike and I are the assistants. And I remember the first day I went to practice, I am so scared. I have no idea about the NBA. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And he plucks me out of college and says, "You're going to be my assistant." And I don't coach anything like him. Fratello coaches exactly like him, same voice, same everything. And he walks up to me as we're going to our first practice, and UB says, "Hey, don't try to be like me. Just be yourself." It's the greatest advice anyone's ever given to me. And, and I said, it was liberating. And, and so, it allowed me to coach for 50 years. I mean, basically, because I just try to be myself. But the great Dick Motta, who coached the Chicago Bulls, was one of the great, also a college coach turned teacher. Rick Adelman coached 2,000 games in our league. Right. Portland, Houston. This guy could flat out coach. And Mike D'Antoni, coached 15 years after being a player in Italy, comes to the U.S. and really changes, I think BJ and I have said, the way the NBA is played. He brought fast tempo to the league. And I thought what he did in Phoenix with Steve Nash, their slogan was, we're going to get a shot up in 7 seconds or less. That was not done. George Karl was an excellent coach, won over 1,000 games in our league. Fitch, I mentioned. Rudy Tomjanovich coached the Houston Rockets with Drexler and those guys, was a guy from New Jersey by the name of Al Attles, who was with the Golden State Warriors.
One of the great voices. He got a great voice. Legendary.
And Al Attles, Mo, was also the toughest player in the league. No one fought. That's when you could fight if you did something wrong. No one fought Al Attles because they would get knocked out.
What do they call him? The Terminator? What do they call it? What was his nickname?
And he was from Newark, New Jersey. And when I came into the league, I heard that voice, and it was like, I said, "My God, this is scary." I mean, this voice is like God speaking to you. And I just, when I told him I'm from New Jersey, he took a liking to me, and I was always his friend forever, and I love him to death. And what a guy he was. But Al was incredible. Bernie Bickerstaff, who's JB Bickerstaff, the coach of Cleveland's dad, was another guy. Coach, he was an executive in our league, but he also coached over 1,000 games. Cotton Fitzsimmons coached the Phoenix Suns and Kansas City Kings, great teams, real innovator. Carlisle has coached over 1,700 games. Imagine that.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
as a head coach, Mike Dunleavy, Fratello, Del Harris was one of our great teachers in the game. So I just think that there's so many great ones in there. 15 guys got named and everything. We could probably make a list of 10 more, but it was nice that they honored the coaches at least. That was good. But I think there's more to come on that.
Now, I want to ask you about a dream team and stuff, but I've got one question before we get there. If you had to make a starting five of all the players you've coached, but not the best ability, the best players to coach, because I think there's a difference in players that are great at basketball and players that are receptive to their coaches and take things on board. Who would be those five guys that you've had playing under you that you think took the most on board?
Well, it's funny, and I don't know, Mo, that, everyone talks about the dream team being the greatest team of all time, but 2 years prior to that, Chuck and I coached the East All-Stars, and I'm looking at the picture right now in 1990 in Miami at All-Star game. That team would have beat the dream team by 25 points.
Who was on that team, Coach?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you how good a coach I was. I had 4 guys from the Pistons on that team. Can you imagine that? 4 to 12 players are Pistons. I had Dumars and Isaiah. I had Rodman, and I had Bill Laimbeer on the team. Patrick Ewing, Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Charles Barkley, a guy by the name of Reggie Miller, Michael Jordan, Dominique Wilkins, Kevin McHale, and that kid Pippen. Yeah, the kid Pippen too. Not a bad team.
And
it was ridiculous team.
And look at who they beat.
It was
they beat Hakeem Olajuwon, Magic Johnson, David Robertson, Drexler, Mullins, AC Green, James Webb. Like the West Conference was stacked as well. So
who was the coach of that team? Was it Riley?
I would assume so. I'm gonna have to check this one.
Okay.
Yeah, Pat Riley.
Yeah, I beat his ass all the time anyway.
Yeah.
But
Coach still got the fire.
But why do you think they could beat the dream team?
How could they?
What makes you say that?
Larry Bird was healthy. When the dream team came about, Larry couldn't play anymore. And so, and Michael was 2 years younger. But Isaiah was such a better player than Stockton. Not even close. And there was nothing at all like Rodman in the world. He might have started World War III, but Barkley was on that team. It was an amazing team, but these guys were just in their prime. And Dumars was a great player. I mean, Reggie Miller could flat out shoot. But BJ knows Kevin McHale. I don't know if I've ever seen a better back to the basket player. To me, he was unstoppable. And the chief, Robert Parrish, and Ewing was really Patrick in 1990 was a flat out stud.
Yeah.
It was just my feeling that they were so good, so ready, and they were a team. And the other group was an all-star group. They weren't a team, in my opinion.
Hey, Coach, you've coached now for quite some time.
Thank you.
And how have you maintained your ability to coach players that were in the 70s, 80s, 90s till now? Like, how have you changed as a coach? Because the players are different now, right? And the game is different. But how have you continued to be current in how to coach and connect with today's athletes?
That's a great question because I have coaches 30 years younger than me that can't connect to players. And my thing is, while I was coaching, when I went to coach the Pistons, for instance, or when I'm coaching the Hawks starting out, my babies are being born, right?
Right.
And then when I'm coaching the Pistons, my kids are 3 and 6 when I first go there. And so I constantly were watching them grow up. So I was keeping track naturally, organically with the trends that were going on. But then when I got into college at different times, like my first 6 years of coaching were in college coaching. And then my last 9 were in college. I coached Michael Jordan's 2 sons. Is that the number one thing in coaching that I learned that I didn't know when I started was that you have to love every player. I have a lot of coaches that don't like their players. And guess what? It's like having your own family. If you don't like your own kids, they figure it out real quick. So I love the players that I coach. I'm totally committed to helping them get better. A lot of coaches now, especially at the collegiate level, it's all about them. It's about me winning. And the pro coaches, I think the biggest thing now, our staffs are so big. Most of my pro career, we were 2 assistant coaches and a head coach. Now there's like 6 or 8 people on a coaching staff,
And
10.
and in college, the
All these,
coaches make crazy money while the players don't make nothing as well.
yeah. And so I think right now the biggest thing is, just like, you're doing it for the right reasons, but the biggest thing is, I think, is I understand now that of the 12 or 15 players on your team, every one of them, Mo, BJ, I have to coach differently. It's just like, my 2 children and BJ's kids, each one of them's different. So I got to coach, I got to parent them differently. It's the same in coaching. If I got 12 different players, I got to coach 12 people differently. And if you try to coach them all the same, you're going to be a massive failure.
Yep.
So
Because they're all different.
so when you got to coaching the dream team, how much
Yeah.
coaching did they require? Or was it simply, because we always hear the saying, the great players will work out a way to play together. Was it a question of just bringing them all in and letting them scrimmage together? How much actual coaching did that squad require?
None. 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 No, the only thing was to make sure they all got to the game. That was the whole key. Make sure they all get there. But I think there was none. I mean, we had Coach K, one of the greatest college coaches of all time. He was an assistant on that team. Chuck was the head coach. Lenny Wilkins, who's coached 2,700 games. He's the other assistant. PJ Carlissimo is a college coach. He's another assistant. So, I mean, there was no coaching involved, to be honest with you. The average winning margin was 47
Insane.
points a
Insane.
game. Yeah, ridiculous.
Do you have a
So,
story about being with that team that you could share with our
oh,
listeners that they might not know?
yeah, because the thing that was most important was they named Chuck the coach of the team a year and a half ahead of time. And we would and they named the team a year ahead of time. Not like they do now. Now that they pick 30 players to basically try out, and if guys get hurt during the year or if something happens, then just before they go to the Olympics, they name the 12 players. Much better. We had players that really got hurt, got older, and our player, Isaiah Thomas, wasn't named to the team. So now we're coaching him for a whole year and he's not on the team and he deserves to be on the team. So that was really hard. But when we got out to San Diego, where we had training camp, I kept saying to Chuck as we traveled through the NBA season, what are you going to say at the opening meeting? What are we going to say at that opening meeting? It's so important, Chuck. You got to establish what we're going to be about. And as BJ knows, Chuck said, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. That's it. Nothing. A week later, hey, what do you think we should say at that opening meeting? Whatever. Don't worry about it. And all the way up to, we're now going into the meeting room in Sheraton Torrey Pines in San Diego. And he made the meeting room, into a U-shaped table. And it's really important. He was not standing in front like most leaders do when they lecture. He's sitting amongst them. We're all equal. And I thought that was really key. And he said to them, guys, I only have 2 things to tell you. Number one, that the games in the Olympics, and the FIBA games, EuroLeague games, they're only 40 minutes long. An NBA game is 48 minutes. The average professional player on the team, of the 11 professional players, their average was between playing 38 minutes and 41 minutes a game.
With no load management. With no load. Let's
Yeah,
let's get that one in there right now.
It was not invented at that point. And so now these guys, so Chuck says to them, listen, you can't, two things. We all have to commit to winning a gold medal. If we don't win a gold medal, they're not going to let us back in the country. Do we commit to that? And they said yes. He said, you can't worry about how much playing time you get and how many shots you get. Do you commit to that? They all said yes. It was pretty easy. Now he said to them, this was the one that I didn't get. He said, the most important thing though is that you be on time. And I'm saying, shoot, we waited a year and a half and now you're telling them the most important thing is to be on time. And all of a sudden, when he said that, he looked at Michael Jordan and he said, Michael, if you're not on time for practice, the bus to go to practice or a meeting, then that means you don't respect Magic. And Magic, if you're not on time, that means you don't respect Barkley. And he went right down through every player in the team, and it was all about respect. And you know what? So the next day, we have practice at 11 o'clock. I go down as a good assistant to check out to see if the bus is there, Mo. It was my job. I had to make sure the bus is there to go to practice. 10 o'clock in the morning, I go out there. I look, there's a bus right out front of the hotel. I go and I put my head on the bus. It's empty. All the way in the back in the last row is one player, Michael Jordan. He is there 1 hour ahead of everyone. And no one ever came closer than 15 minutes before we were supposed to leave. From then on, you had players getting on a bus 45 minutes, 30 minutes. And in an NBA season, the best players get on a bus usually about 2 minutes to 1 minute before we're supposed to leave.
About 2 seconds.
Yeah, right. And the head coach wouldn't get on the bus till the best player was on.
Exactly. If you're a good head coach, that's what you did.
That's what you do if you're smart. And when he did that, I said, man, that took everything to a new level. So every team, every business I run, it's always about respect. And that's where Chuck was such a genius at. He knew what was important, getting them to all buy into the vision of winning a gold, but not worrying about yourself. But then the second thing is showing respect to the other guys on the team.
You know something, Mo, and I want to say this for Coach. You know, we just talked about, and I'm just listening, talking about, you know, it's easy to coach, and Coach went along with that, but there's an art to coaching great players, and everyone can't coach great players. And Coach and Chuck Daly and Phil Jackson and all these guys, it's not easy to coach those guys, you know, and we just, you know, we were talking here. I know we were joking, but let me share something here. Coach Suhr know that you're not just coaching players, you're coaching people. And as a former player, I could say this: you only get one chance with the players in the locker room. And when those players either say, we're going to say the following, because we only listen to the first speech. I'm going to a coach knows this. A coach knows this, and this holds true in 1946, and it holds true. You only get one chance to show that you can coach. And the moment those players in that locker room determine you don't know what you're saying or you don't respect them, they're going to tune you out. And there's an art to coaching. You just don't put anyone in front of a group like that. And everyone says, yeah, it's easy because they are very, you know, gifted. And that is true. But Coach Daly and Coach Suhr and all of those people, Coach K, they got a gift. And that was well done. They made it look easy. That's why you guys are who you guys are. You guys made it look easy, and that was a phenomenal story. But the story is you got to connect with those people before you can even get to those players. because those players are so gifted. There's no telling Michael Jordan what to do in the last 3 minutes of a game. Okay. If you can't connect with him on day one, you got no chance with any of those great players. So job well done. You guys making it look easy, but that's difficult. And coaching with expectations is a lot different than coaching when no one expects you to be there. The pressure that you guys had on you, not only to win, but you had to win by 40 points. That's incredible.
Hey, let me tell you what happened. There's always a backstory, right, BJ? So now, the Pistons and the Bulls were not kissing cousins at the time. And so Chuck's the coach of the dream team. Michael's playing and winning championships. He's exhausted. As when you finish a championship, as BJ will tell you, you got nothing left in the tank. You have spent it all. And so after Michael had been named to the team a year earlier, and now all of a sudden, after winning the finals, they got to go to camp in a few days for the Olympics. Mike says, I'm done, man. I'm done. I have nothing in the tank, Chuck. I can't. And so Chuck called him up and said, listen, after we get through training camp just to get organized, I will have no shoot-arounds. I will have no practices. And when we get to Barcelona, you can play golf every damn day.
See, that's coaching.
Yes.
You got to know your personnel.
You play golf every single day. And we literally brought the great late Payne Stewart, who was a neighbor of a friend of Chuck's, to come along with us. And he played golf with Michael every day in Barcelona.
That's crazy.
And the great Rod Thorne and Chuck would be playing behind him. They would close down the golf course, have security out there just for Michael Jordan to play. And so they're behind him as he's playing. And, Michael can play a golf course in under 2 hours because there's no one else on the course. And so he's playing golf. And the other guy he's playing with is one of the top PGA pros. And as they're driving on the golf course, Rod and Chuck are behind him in a golf cart. All of a sudden they go, look, and they see money. Michael's wallet had fallen out of the golf cart. It's on the middle of the fairway. And Rod Thorne, who's the vice president of the league, he's running the league, basically basketball. He picks up the thing and he says, do you think we should look inside of it to see how much money he has? And Chuck says, no, let's just give it to him. And Rod says, I gotta look. And he had like $10,000, $10,000 in his wallet, and they were like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And so they got it to him by the next hole and everything. But Chuck couldn't get over that the guy had that much money in his wallet that he's carrying around.
Yeah.
And it was so magnificent, but he figured out, and you know what? We played every game we played was at 10 p.m. Barcelona time because it was 4 o'clock US time. And so all day long, there's nothing to do except for Mike to go play golf. And the biggest problem was he wouldn't play Mo 18 holes. He had to play 36 holes.
That's right.
And so when we're playing in the semifinals, and it's really a tough game, he's going to play against, Croatia or Lithuania. One of Marcellinus and Sabonis and those guys. Chuck says, "Can you only play 18 today? Make sure you don't get tired." Yeah. So that's the relationships, and that's what I love about. That's what you miss. You miss the relationship.
What was everyone else doing all day while Michael Jordan was out on the golf course then?
Mo, you never ask. Don't ask.
Well, no, I want to know, I want to know from the standpoint of if you take someone like Kobe, for example, right? When Kobe came to London for the Olympics, this guy was at the practice facility at 4 a.m. every day, and he would work out for like 4 hours before the rest of Team USA pulled up at 8 a.m. So at 8 a.m., he's in a full-blown sweat, and he's been shooting the ball. But you're saying that these guys on the dream team, they weren't doing none of that.
No, there was no practice, no nothing. We rented a brand new entire hotel, every room in the hotel. They had all their food there. They didn't have to go out or anything. The only guy that left the hotel was Barkley.
Oh,
and he would go out at 3 or 4 in the morning and walk the Ramalade, the great, wide street there, because he loved people, Charles. And so
with no security as well, is what we hear.
And you just prayed he got back to the hotel safely,
Man, it's crazy. Listen, Coach, we can talk basketball for hours. There's so many stories, so much experience that we want to dive in. We've been rapping for over like an hour now, so we're going to have to get you back on the show. We really appreciate you coming through. I need the people, the listeners, the fans to show some love, show some support, to thank Coach Suhr for coming through, show him some love. Where can the people find you online on social media and your podcast?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter at coaching_you or at Brendan Suhr, BrendanSuhr. And we have a few followers that, and try to talk basketball, try to talk coaching and things like that. But next month, Mo, we're going to have a big announcement that I'll come back and share with you guys. But for people that love coaching and love basketball, whether it's from youth coaching all the way up to pros, we're going to unleash a platform that's going to change the world of coaching. So I'll share that the next time we come.
Hey, Coach, can we reserve a spot for our future GM here, Mo Mooncey, who wants to be a general manager? You run an executive, like for executives, like executive, like a camp. Can we reserve for the Hoop Genius podcast, Mo Mooncey, to come in and take your class over the summer? Can we do that?
Yeah, July 11th and 12th at the Planet Hollywood in beautiful Las Vegas. We will have 220 people from around the world.
We're 221 now. 221 now. Mo's going to be there.
He's in the front row.
Mo's in the front.
I was never good at school when I was a kid because it wasn't about basketball. Anything basketball.
There are no exams. There'll be no exams.
I don't mind the exams. I just didn't want to be learning about useless things. I want to talk basketball. I want to learn every single piece of information that I can humanly absorb about this game. So I appreciate that assist right there, BJ. Because
so
I'm already looking forward to this.
Front office training camp to be an NBA executive, scout, coach, G League, Euro League. People from all over the world are going to come and teach as well as learn. And then prior to that, we have, which BJ's been to, I have a phenomenal learning session, my Coaching You VIP experience, where for 2 days the best NBA head coaches teach
the best
from all over the world, about coaching, and they share everything.
Mo, he has the best. It's the best.
I need to be.
So Mo, we know what you're going to do in the summer.
Yes,
we're coming there, and we're going to get you, and you get a chance to learn from the master himself.
You're coming to Las Vegas, baby.
Hey, it means the world, and I'm going to take in all of this information and then come back and make this podcast even greater for our listeners, because that's what they deserve. Brendan, we need to get you on a regular segment. We need to have you rocking with us more often.
BJ's been bragging about how incredible you are, but more importantly, the people that are listening, how it's such, he enjoys it so much, and that's what it's about. It's about when the people that you're talking to enjoy it. And that's why I love the forum that you're doing it. And you guys are great at it. So I'm honored that you had me on. Thanks so much.
We appreciate it. It won't be the last time. I can tell you that much. You're going to get sick of my voice by the end of the year. I can promise you that much. Anyway, to our listeners at home, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you go and show some love to Coach Suhr on the social media. Show some love to BJ. And as always, keep sharing the show. The more you guys spread the word about the show and tell your friends to listen, to tune in, the more we can keep bringing you these great guests and having these great conversations. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you learned something. Make sure that you subscribed across all platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, YouTube, wherever it may be. Make sure you subscribe. Thank you to our sponsor, NBA 2K22. If you haven't yet, go and get yourself a copy. Coach, BJ, thank you both for the wisdom.
Thank you.
To our listeners at home, you guys know what it is. Get buckets.